Hello everyone, I'm Helen from Susan's family. Today, I'd like to introduce the Animism series, the Panda Stripe Vest. For this electronic tutorial, you can visit our website by searching for susud.com. The vest is divided into front piece, back piece, the connection, the collar and cuffs. First, knit the front and back pieces separately. After completing them, connect the corresponding shoulder and body areas. Then, pick up stitches around the neckline to knit the collar. Finally, pick up stitches around the cuffs to knit the sleeve edges. Let's start with the back piece. It is divided into the hem, the body, the chest, and the shoulder. Use the cable cast-on method. First, knit the hem back and forth. For the following sections, 2 colors will be used. Knit back and forth using a method of 2 rows per pass. Let's first take a look at the chart. The chart is in a grid format here. One cell in the chart represents 1 stitch, which corresponds to 1 loop when knitting. These blank areas are sometimes omitted and sometimes not needed for knitting. When counting the number of stitches per row here, just count the number of cells. Then match it with the number of loops on the needle. The numbers on the side of the chart indicate row numbers. Arrows show the direction of knitting. The row numbers on the right side of the chart indicate knitting on the right side. Read the chart from right to left. The row numbers on the left side indicate knitting on the wrong side. Read the chart from left to right. At the same time, knit the opposite stitch pattern on the wrong side. The chart here is for teaching purposes only. Please refer to the actual project you have in hand. A variety of stitch techniques are used in knitting. The chart will be appropriately labeled. I won't go through each one in detail. Next, please watch me demonstrate the specific knitting method. This product requires using 2 strands of yarn for knitting. That is, combine 2 threads into 1 strand to knit. For the convenience of watching in future tutorials, I will demonstrate using a single strand of cotton yarn, and the colors are random. In subsequent tutorials, 1 strand of yarn represents 2 actual strands. For specific yarn details, color schemes, and hook sizes, please refer to the detail page of our product and the paper instructions. First, cast on for the hem. Use 1 knit stitch, followed by 1 purl stitch alternately to cast on. Then, knit the single rib pattern back and forth. That is, 1 knit stitch, followed by 1 purl stitch to create an alternating texture. Let me demonstrate this process. After the cable cast on, we knit the single rib pattern. Pay attention, the video mainly demonstrates the method. For specific stitch counts and row numbers, please refer to the chart. You can learn this first, and then follow the chart according to your actual situation when knitting. Please watch the demonstration. First, take out the corresponding yarn. Make a slip knot with the yarn. If there are no special circumstances, leave about 10 centimeters of yarn. This makes it convenient to hide the yarn tail later. Hold a straight needle in your left hand, or one end of the circular needle. Insert it into the loop, and slightly tighten. This is the first stitch. Hold the other straight needle in your right hand with a pencil grip, or the other end of the circular needle. Wrap the yarn around your right little finger once. Gently pinch the yarn between your ring finger and middle finger. Place the yarn between your index finger and middle finger. This is the proper posture for crocheting. If you are working the cable cast on, After completing the first stitch, there are two scenarios. One is that the first stitch counts as a purl stitch. The other is that the first stitch counts as a knit stitch. These two methods depend on the specific situation. In most cases, we count the first stitch as a purl stitch. The second stitch starts as a knit stitch. Place the right needle above the yarn. Insert it from front to back through the loop on the left needle. Use your right index finger to guide the yarn. Yarn over and pull the yarn through. Slip it onto the left needle. Don't pull the yarn too tight. Otherwise, it will be difficult to pick up stitches later. The second knit stitch is now complete. You can see the yarn is below. Next, start the purl stitch. Place the right needle underneath the yarn. Pass it from back to front between these two loops. Pay attention to the position between the loops. Do not pass through the loops. Then yarn over. Pull through. Slip it onto the left needle. This completes the third stitch. This stitch is worked as a purl stitch. You can see the yarn is above. Continue with the knit stitch. Place the right needle above the yarn. Insert between the loops. Yarn over and draw through. This completes the fourth stitch. Work another purl stitch. Place the right needle underneath the yarn. Insert between the loops. Yarn over and draw through. This is the fifth stitch. Continue to alternate between knit and purl stitches. When the yarn is above, start with a knit stitch. When the yarn is below, start with a purl stitch. Repeat until you reach the required number of stitches. In another scenario, count the first stitch as a knit stitch. Then the second stitch would be a purl stitch. Then continue to alternate between knit and purl stitches. This is the method for cable cast on. When we cast on, if the pattern does not specify whether the first stitch is a purl or a knit stitch, we can determine it based on the chart. Read the chart from left to right. For example, if the first stitch on the left side is a knit stitch, then the first stitch when casting on would be a knit stitch. If the second stitch is a purl stitch, then the second stitch, when casting on, would be a purl stitch. Continue to alternate between knit and purl stitches after that. For another example, in this chart, if the first stitch on the left side is a knit stitch, then the first stitch, when casting on, would be a knit stitch. If the second stitch is also a knit stitch, cast on one knit stitch. If the third stitch is a purl stitch, cast on one purl stitch. Then continue to alternate between knit and purl stitches. We can also take a look at the texture after casting on. The stitches further back indicate that the stitch just cast on was a purl stitch. The stitches closer to the front indicate that the stitch just cast on was a knit stitch. I have fewer stitches here, mainly to explain the method. According to the chart above, you can see that, after completing the cast on, we start knitting the single rib pattern. The single rib pattern overall consists of one knit stitch alternating with one purl stitch texture. First, work row 1. Row 1 is worked on the right side. Read the chart from right to left. Work all stitches according to the chart. Note that, for different projects, the beginning and ending stitches of the piece may vary. Just refer to the chart when knitting. If the beginning and ending stitches differ from the sample, you can first watch the demonstration, then follow the chart to knit. The first symbol in the sample chart is a vertical line, which indicates a knit stitch. When knitting, pick up one needle with your right hand, or the other end of the circular needle. Wrap the yarn once around your right little finger, and gently pinch the yarn with your ring finger and middle finger. Place the yarn between the middle finger and index finger. Before knitting the stitch, place the yarn under the right needle, which is at the back. Then insert the right needle from left to right into the first loop on the left needle. Note, not between the two loops. Yarn over and draw through. While releasing the loop from the left needle. One knit stitch is now complete. The second symbol is a horizontal line, which represents a purl stitch. Note, when alternating between knit and purl stitches, make sure to place the yarn in the corresponding position before stitching. Therefore, before making a purl stitch, bring the yarn to the front first, then purl the stitch. Insert the right needle from right to left. Insert into the loop. Yarn over and draw through. While releasing the loop from the left needle. One purl stitch is now complete. The third stitch is a knit stitch again. Before knitting the stitch, make sure to move the yarn to the back first. Then insert from left to right into the loop. Yarn over and draw through. Another knit stitch is now complete. You can observe that, after completing the knit stitch, on the side facing you, a braid-like texture forms below. On the other side, it appears as a horizontal line. The fourth stitch is another purl stitch. Place the yarn in front of the needle. Insert from right to left into the loop. Yarn over and draw through. Another purl stitch is now complete. You can observe that, after completing the purl stitch, on the side facing you, there is a horizontal line below the loop. From the back, there is a braid below the loop. Continue to alternate with one knit stitch and one purl stitch. Pay attention. Always place the yarn in the corresponding position before stitching. That is, before knitting a knit stitch, move the yarn to the back first. Before knitting a purl stitch, move the yarn to the front first. If you can follow the texture, You can also stitch according to the texture. Loops that are more forward are knit stitches, and loops that are more to the back are purl stitches. When you see a knit stitch, knit it. When you see a purl stitch, purl it. Follow this method, and continue to finish the row. The edge stitch is worked according to the chart. Now, the first row of the swatch is complete. If you're not sure how to count rows, after finishing the first row, you can place a marker on any chain on the right side. Make a mark. To help count the rows, if you don't have a stitch marker, you can use a safety pin or a paperclip instead. This also serves as a marker on the right side. Now, proceed to work the second row. The second row is worked on the wrong side. Read the chart from left to right, and work the stitches opposite to the chart. This means knitting the purl symbols and purling the knit symbols. The first symbol in the sample swatch chart is a knit stitch, so I will work one purl stitch. Note: when purling, make sure to bring the yarn to the front before working the stitch. Next is a purl symbol, so work one knit stitch. You can also follow the texture, looking at the horizontal lines below, which indicate a purl stitch texture. Just work the purl stitch. When you see a braid below, it indicates a knit stitch texture, so work the knit stitch. Horizontal lines mean purl stitches. Braids mean knit stitches. Continue to follow the texture while crocheting. Finish the second row. The texture of the edge stitch might not be clear. Refer to the chart for your crochet work. This way, the second row is completed. Now, move on to the third row. Similarly, you can crochet based on the texture below. If the texture of the edge stitch is not clear, refer to the chart to crochet. Continue with the same stitch technique as the texture below. For horizontal lines, work the purl stitch. For braids, work the knit stitch. Continue to finish this row. For the last stitch, you can also refer to the chart. For each subsequent row, whether on the right side or wrong side, you can crochet based on the texture below. If you see horizontal lines below, work the purl stitch. If you see braids below, work the knit stitch. This is the method for single rib stitch. A few rows of single rib stitch have been completed in this swatch. We can count the row numbers on the right side. The loop with the stitch marker is formed by the beginning chain. Let's start counting upwards from this braid at the top. One braid represents one row. There are 5 braids here, plus the loops on the needle, which also count as one row. Therefore, we have knit a total of 6 rows here. This is how you count the rows in single rib stitch. That concludes the explanation for knitting the hem. Next, we will knit the body. Here, we need to crochet lifted stitches, and use 2 colors, alternating between them. Let's look at the chart. The chart shows 2 color blocks. Each color block represents a different color. The positions with the same color blocks as the hem indicates knitting with the same color thread as the hem. The other color block means to switch to another color for knitting. For easy distinction, I will refer to the first color block as color 1, and the other one as color 2. Next, let's see the lifted stitch symbol. This symbol, which is similar to an arch shape, represents a lifted stitch. A complete lifted stitch occupies 2 rows, meaning it takes 2 rows of knitting to complete one lifted stitch. In the first row of this lifted stitch, there will be 2 different stitch techniques. The horizontal bar indicates that you should knit a purl stitch. The symbol without a horizontal bar indicates that you should knit a knit stitch. In the first row, you will see this arch-shaped symbol. This is the second row of the lifted stitch. Moving forward, any position with just the arch symbol represents the second row of the lifted stitch. Wherever you see this symbol, it means you should follow the method for the second row of the lifted stitch. After understanding the lifted stitch symbols, we can now begin the actual knitting process. Let's start with the first row. Here, I'll use this small sample for demonstration. This row is worked on the right side of the piece. Simply follow the stitch pattern from the chart. This row also forms a color block that matches the hem. So, continue using the same yarn as the hem. Begin with 1 knit stitch. Then, we have the first row of the lifted stitch symbol. There is a horizontal bar here, which indicates that you should knit a purl stitch. Pick up the loop from the left needle, and knit 1 purl stitch. Next, there is an arch symbol below. You need to follow the second row of the lifted stitch. Start with 1 yarn over stitch. Bring the yarn from back to front over the right needle. Complete the yarn over. Then, work 1 slip stitch. Insert the right needle from back to front into the next stitch, on the left needle without knitting it. And transfer it to the right needle. Complete the slip stitch. This is the method for working the second row of the lifted stitch. Then, you go back to the first row of the lifted stitch. There are also horizontal lines. You just need to knit the purl stitches according to these lines. Pay attention to bring the yarn from below upwards before knitting. After finishing, ensure that the loop from the previous yarn over remains on the right needle. Below is another arch symbol. Similarly, work the second row of the lifted stitch. Start with 1 yarn over stitch. Then slip 1 stitch. This completes the second row. Next is the first row of the lifted stitch. Where there are horizontal lines, knit purl stitches. When you encounter an arch symbol, work the second row of the lifted stitch. Knit 1 yarn over stitch and 1 slip stitch. Continue following this method as you proceed with your knitting. For the last stitch here, knit a knit stitch. This completes the first row. Next, work on the second row. This row is still worked on the right side, and you need to use color too. Start knitting at the beginning of the previous row. Pick up the first loop from the row below. Then join the yarn and knit 1 stitch. Following is the second row of the lifted stitch, which requires knitting yarn over stitches and slip stitches. Below is the first row of the lifted stitch. The absence of horizontal bars indicates that you should knit a stitch. Here, the left needle has 2 loops. One is the loop from the yarn over stitch, and the other is the loop from the slip stitch. You need to pick up both loops at the same time, and knit 1 stitch. After completing this, continue on with the adjacent second row of lifted stitches, working yarn over stitches and slip stitches. Next is the first row of lifted stitches. The chart shows no horizontal bars, so you need to knit a stitch. Here, still pick up the 2 loops from the yarn over stitch and the slip stitch, and work them together. As you proceed with this row, when you encounter the second row of lifted stitches, work the yarn over stitches and slip stitches. When you encounter the first row of lifted stitches again, pick up the corresponding 2 loops and knit a stitch. Repeat this process. Continue knitting. End with 1 knit stitch. At this point, the second row is completed. Move on to the third row. Turn the piece. This row is worked on the wrong side. You need to work the stitches opposite to what is shown in the chart. If you have trouble distinguishing the right side from the wrong side, you can identify it using the starting tail of the yarn. The side where the yarn tail is on the left is the right side of the piece. The opposite side is the wrong side. The first stitch in the chart is a knit symbol. Therefore, you should work a purl stitch. Here, you encounter a color block of color 1. Use color 1 to knit. Next, follow the first row of lifted stitches. There are horizontal bars here, which indicate purl stitches, so you should work knit stitches instead. Pick up the 2 loops on the left side of the lifted stitch and knit. After completing, move down to the second row of lifted stitches. Work the yarn over stitches and slip stitches. Then go back to the first row of lifted stitches and work knit stitches as indicated. Continue knitting using this method. Note that in the first row of lifted stitches, always pick up the corresponding 2 loops together to knit. The last stitch is a purl stitch. At this point, the third row is completed. Next, start working on the fourth row. Use color 2 to knit. Continue working on the wrong side of the piece. At this point, the yarn tail is located on the right side, so you can simply pick up and start knitting. Start with 1 purl stitch. Then move down to the second row of lifted stitches. Work the yarn over stitches and slip stitches as indicated. Go back to the first row of lifted stitches. According to the chart, work opposite stitch patterns, knit purl stitches. Pick up 2 loops from adjacent lifted stitches and knit them together. Then move to the second row of lifted stitches. Work the yarn over stitches and slip stitches as indicated. When you encounter the first row of lifted stitches, pick up 2 loops from the lifted stitches and work a purl stitch. Continue in this manner. Keep knitting. Finish with 1 purl stitch. At this point, the fourth row is completed. Continue to knit the fifth row. The method is identical to the first row. Refer to the chart and knit the corresponding stitches. Start with color 1. Knit 1 knit stitch. Then pick up 2 loops from the lifted stitches and work a purl stitch. Next is the second row of lifted stitches. Work the yarn over stitches and slip stitches as indicated. Continue knitting by referring to the chart. Finish with 1 knit stitch. At this point, the fifth row is completed. Next, knit the sixth row. Use color 2 for this row. Start with 1 knit stitch. Then proceed with the second row of lifted stitches, working the yarn over stitches and slip stitches, followed by the first row of lifted stitches. Pick up 2 loops and work a knit stitch. Continue knitting using this method. Finish with one knit stitch. At this point, the 6th row is completed. Continue knitting using the method from rows 3 to 6, repeating this sequence as you go down, since it involves 2 rows per round trip. When counting rows, 1 braid represents 2 rows. When both color 1 and color 2 appear on one side simultaneously, it indicates the end of a 2-row cycle. The loops on the needle also count as 1 braid at this point. For example, in my sample, the cycle ends here, with 3 braids. This means you have knit 6 rows. You can also turn to the wrong side to check. There are 3 diagonal lines between the braids. Each diagonal line also represents 2 rows. The last row here will have this symbol. This is the first row of lifted stitches. If the position below corresponds to a lifted stitch, then knitting follows the method for the first row of lifted stitches. Pick up 2 adjacent loops from the lifted stitch. Correspondingly, knit or purl as required. Moving forward, whenever you encounter the same stitch pattern, understand and knit it using this method. Next, refer to the chart to complete the body part. This concludes the explanation of the body part. Now, let's move on to the chest. Here, start with a few rows that involve underarm decreases. Then continue knitting evenly. Still use 2 colors. And work in a sequence of 2 rows for each color. Please watch my demonstration. Start with row 1. This row does not require any decreases. For the beginning stitches, refer to the chart and knit the corresponding knit and purl stitches. Pay attention to the lifted stitches. Pick up the corresponding 2 loops and continue knitting. Then proceed with the first and the second row of lifted stitches. These stitch techniques have been demonstrated before. Everyone, please complete this section. After completing the first row, start row 2. Use the remaining yarn from this side to knit. The beginning stitches of this row need to be decreased. Use the bind off method to decrease. First, knit 2 stitches. Then, insert the left needle into the first stitch on the right needle. Lift it over the second stitch's loop. And slip it off. This decreases 1 stitch. Continue in this manner. Knit 1 stitch. Then decrease 1 stitch. Now you have decreased 2 stitches. Continue with the same method. Decrease the number of stitches required by the chart. My sample stitch count is arbitrary. When you encounter a lifted stitch position, pick up 2 loops and knit them together. Decrease the corresponding number of stitches. At this point, there is 1 loop remaining on the right needle. This loop is from the left cell after the decrease. It's the first position after completing the decrease. The chart continues from the second cell on the left. Work the corresponding stitch pattern. After completing the last stitch, row 2 is now finished. Next, work row 3. Use the color from row 1 to knit. Follow a similar method as row 1. Begin working the corresponding knit and purl stitches. Next, work the first and second rows corresponding to the lifted stitches. Complete these rows. After completing, start row 4. Follow a similar method as row 2. Begin with a few stitches using the bind off method. Bind off the corresponding number of stitches. Since we will work this row on the wrong side, here we will purl and bind off at the same time. I will demonstrate a few stitches. Follow this method to bind off the corresponding number of stitches. After completing, the loop on the right needle will be the first stitch after binding off. This corresponds to the position of the first cell in the chart. Continue working from the second cell, following the corresponding stitch pattern. After finishing the last stitch, row 4 is complete. For the remaining rows, follow the method used in the first 4 rows when binding off stitches. Refer to the chart for specific stitch counts. When you encounter rows that need to be worked even, follow the method used for the body. This concludes the explanation of the chest. Next, we will work on the shoulder. Here, stitches need to be bound off at the neckline position. The last few rows of the shoulders require holding stitches for short rows to form the sloping shoulder. Please watch as I demonstrate. Start by picking up the yarn tail from the chest and working one side of the shoulder. This is the first row of the shoulder. Refer to the chart to work the corresponding stitch. After completing the required number of stitches, leave the remaining stitches unworked for now. For convenience in working, you can move the remaining unworked loops onto a straight needle or place them on hold. When placing stitches on hold, use a long yarn tail. Thread it through a darning needle. And then pick up the loops from back to front sequentially. The method is the same when moving them to a straight needle, picking them up from back to front onto the needle. This completes placing the stitches on hold. Continue working rows 2-6 from here. For row 2, start from the right end with the yarn tail. And continue working to the left. Work the corresponding stitches as shown in the chart. For rows 3-6, some rows require binding off stitches on the side near the neckline, which is the end where stitches are placed on hold. Other rows should be worked even. Complete these sections. At the end of row 7, leave a few stitches unworked. Note that when counting stitches, one lifted stitch with 2 loops counts as 1 stitch. For example, I left 4 stitches unworked in my sample like this. Also, pay attention to the edge stitch. If you are working the second row of lifted stitch, don't forget the position where the yarn is attached. These stitches that are left out will not be worked for now. You can temporarily slide them onto a straight needle. Then continue working from the position on the right straight needle. On row 8, bind off stitches on the neckline side. Then continue crocheting according to the chart. Finish the corresponding stitch count for row 7. Pay attention to row 8. On the last stitch, there is a yarn attachment position at this edge. Remember to pick up and work the yarn attachment position together when crocheting. For rows 9 to 14, continue working by matching the previous method. Some rows require leaving a few stitches unworked on the ending side. When leaving stitches, slide them onto a straight needle for later use. On the last row, you need to eliminate the row. Work the positions where stitches were previously left unworked. Let me demonstrate the method for the last row. I'll use this small sample for the demonstration. First, pick up and work the corresponding knit or purl stitches. Then, pick up the yarn loops from the positions where stitches were left unworked. Work these with the corresponding knit or purl stitches. This completes the elimination of the row. The shoulders will form an angled curve to one side. This is the method of leaving stitches for short rows. Finally, perform the bind off with a slip stitch. Use the same color as the last row for knitting. The method is identical to the slip stitch bind off used when decreasing stitches earlier. Bind off while continuing to knit. In the end, only one loop remains. Stretch it slightly. Leave a little yarn tail underneath. Cut the yarn. Pull the yarn through the remaining loop. Gently pull to tighten. Leave a long yarn tail for the other end, then cut the yarn. Weave this yarn tail downwards to the back. Follow the texture as you weave it in. You can weave in a few extra stitches for security. For the other yarn tail, follow the same method and weave it in along the texture. Complete this step. Now, we have finished this side of the neckline and shoulder. Next, rejoin the yarn to knit the neckline bind off and the other shoulder. First, transfer the loops to a circular needle or straight needle. Cut the yarn. Now, everyone check the stitch count. Remember, 2 loops from the lifted stitch count as 1 stitch. Then, remove the yarn. For this side of the shoulder, use the corresponding color for row 1, then bind off a few stitches with slip stitches. For my sample, the stitch count is arbitrary here. After that, refer to the chart to knit the other side of the neckline and shoulder. On the next row, at the position of the first stitch of the previous row, make a slip knot to join the yarn and start knitting. For some rows, you need to bind off stitches on the side closer to the neckline. For other rows, you need to leave stitches on the left side for short rows. The method for these short rows is the same. First, leave a certain number of stitches on the left side. Then knit back and forth for a few rows. Continue to repeat the same steps. When decreasing rows, the third to last row will be the final one shown here. Knit the corresponding stitch patterns on both edges. In the middle, knit the first and second rows of lifted stitches as indicated. Refer to the chart for the stitch techniques and knit accordingly. On the second to last row, continue knitting the corresponding knit stitches and lifted stitches. For the last row, knit and purl stitches. After completing, bind off with a slip stitch. Then fasten off the yarn and weave in the ends. Everyone should complete this part. This concludes the explanation for knitting the shoulder.